Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Let me clarify a couple of things first, and then we will get into the topic for today. First, I have stopped saying the Maoist Third Worldist Collective. That's it, the Maoist Third Worldist Collective. Now, why did I do that? Because there appears to be next to no interest in the subject. And I know of one other person who was about to start an organization of Maoist Third Worldists. And I want to be a part of that. Now, I'm not saying that the Maoist Third Worldist Collective would bar me from participation in that other individual's group. Of course not. But I feel like I've been more or less wasting my time trying to build up a thing which is not getting built up. I mean, so far as I know, only one person has expressed interest in the subject. Only one person. And I want to say thank you to that one person. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But one person, in my view, does not a collective make. Maybe it does, but at least I don't think so. I think it's hard to justify that. Obviously, there's no interest in the Maoist Third Worldist Collective, and so riding a dead hobby horse is to me a waste of time, and so I'm going to stop doing it. Now, obviously, if any of you also want to consider yourselves a part of that, you are more than welcome to do that. But I will no longer be promoting it because I don't feel that it was a successful enterprise on my part. Now, in terms of the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism, that is successful, and here is why. Because the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism is me. I am it. I am the Institute. It's basically my work and my work only. Now, is it always going to be like that? I don't know. But for the time being, it refers to that website and to these podcasts, which I am making. So essentially, it is the work in conscientization that I am performing on that particular website or through that particular website. And I feel that that is a much more productive activity to engage in than the Maoist Third Worldist Collective, which really was not getting off the ground at all. And that is an understatement. Nobody really seemed to care one way or the other, except for that one human being. There was another person who most likely was a troll, I suppose, but he kind of belittled me for it. But his trolling, although admittedly, yeah, he was trolling me. He wasn't entirely wrong. Um, why waste my time with things that are not going anywhere? And that's the way I felt. Whereas my institute, on the other hand, is not going anywhere, but I know it. No, I shouldn't say that. It is going somewhere because it refers to primarily right now my work in conscientization on this podcast. Mark by Mark A. Foster, PhD. Let me explain to you the focus of this particular podcast. And as I mentioned last time, we are basically starting from the beginning with Unit 2. Now, all of those old podcasts are still there. And in fact, if you have links to them, I assume you will be able to find them. But the links on YouTube are gone for the time being. I may at some point bring a few of them back, but at least now when I'm trying to get Unit 2 started, I think having Unit 1 there, which is somewhat different than what I'm going to be doing now, not entirely different, but somewhat different, might justifiably be confusing. Now, am I still a Maoist third worldist? Of course. How could I not be? That is my life. Well, it's a part of my life. So is Bhaskarian critical realism and a number of other approaches and perspectives that I have. But it's certainly a major part of my life. I do think that uh, communism or socialism or whatever you want to call it will begin in the third world, not in the first world. And that's not because the first world has been naughty, although it has been. It's because the third world appears to me, anyway, to lack significant dialectical or revolutionary potential. Well, for that matter, the whole world appears to lack revolutionary or dialectical potential. Maybe it's a mistake to single out the first world as lacking it, because really, if I look around today, where is revolutionary socialism? Um, it's not that evident. I guess you could argue that it still exists to an extent in Cuba, although revolutionary socialism has been dying a slow death, sadly, in Cuba for several years, especially since the death of Fidel Castro. Um, Fidel Castro was certainly a charismatic personality. He sustained um, the Cuban system. He sustained Cuban revolutionary communism. When he became ill and then eventually died, that source of sustenance was gone. Um, you can argue that his brother tried to continue Fidel's work, but his brother, to be honest with you, did not do a really good job. And it never seemed to me that his brother was as committed to revolutionary socialism as was Fidel. So I just don't have much hope that there will be any kind of continuance of revolutionary socialism in Cuba for the time being. On the other hand, if we look at places where there have been communist revolutions or socialist revolutions of a sort, um, they have been in the third world, at least during the 21st century. A big one was in Iraq. I really admired the revolution that occurred in Iraq. Now, was it a Marxist revolution? No, it was closer, I suppose, you could say, to being an anarchist revolution, but it was still really good. Women and men both worked as a part of the revolution. Women were equal with men. There was no system of patriarchy or male dominance in that system in Iraq. What happened, however, to the system in Iraq was that under President Erdogan in Turkey, they bombed that place to smithereens. And so whatever kinds of collective was set up in Iraq was simply destroyed. Now, what happened to those people? Are any of them still around? Well, maybe one of you might know, but I don't. As far as I know, that system, that collective that was set up in Iraq no longer exists. There have also been attempts at revolution in the Philippines and in other places. But you look at the first world, especially my own country of the United States, And I see that there is a tremendous lack of any kind of revolutionary potential here. We are really, really dead. We are really, really dead. I shouldn't laugh, but we are really, really dead. I go south to Mexico. Mexico is 2 miles south of where I live, of my condo. I have a friend down there who runs a leather goods shop. A wonderful man. I don't know if he would call himself a revolutionary socialist or a communist. Maybe I'll ask him sometime, but he certainly appears to like it. He says that here in Mexico, we have a much more positive view of revolutionary socialism or communism than you have 2 miles up to the north, or actually, that place is really 2 blocks south of the United States. So, and I think he's right. Mexicans do not have the same kind of, I guess you could call it McCarthyist spirit in relationship to communism. Even though McCarthyism was killed by Ike, by President Dwight Eisenhower, the spirit of McCarthyism has certainly lived on. And there is this really, really negative view that most Americans have toward democratic socialism, revolutionary socialism, communism, revolutionary socialism, any type of left-wing activity, including my own. I do not get treated very kindly when I tell people that I am a revolutionary socialist or a communist. I don't get treated kindly at all. People are very suspicious. Now, that is generally the case here in the US. Is it the case where I am right now? Here in Mission, Texas, in the warmest county in the state of Texas. I am literally on the same latitude as the city of Miami, Florida. No. My impression is that most people here don't even know what communism is. I go outside and I will frequently wear my Antifa cap. This kind of cap is only for podcast purposes, only for show. I don't wear this cap when I go outside. I probably would get laughed at. In fact, maybe some of you are laughing at me right now. That's okay. You can laugh at me if you want to. But I don't wear this cap outside. I wear commonly my anti-fat cap or one of my other many caps that I have that indicate that I am in some way connected with communism or Marxism, and nobody even gives it a second thought. Literally, it's like I'm not even there. When I would walk around with my commie clothing in Texas, where I lived for 30 years, up until about a year and a half from now, anywhere I went, and I would wear the same commie clothing, I would get dirty looks all the time. I mean, really dirty looks. A lot of my students, most of whom were obviously not communists, would sometimes give me dirty looks. They did not like the fact that there was a commie as professor of their class. Some of them would complain to the dean, but the dean could not stop me from dressing like I wanted to. It's called academic freedom. Now, I suppose if I showed up in my birthday suit, that would be a different matter, but I never did that for obvious reasons. I don't want to disgust people. Plus, I don't think it would be appropriate to do that, especially in a college classroom. So I never did. But there, in that part of the country, which is 20 hours to my north, 20 hours. It's a long, long way. That is more than 2,000 miles to my north. That's a long, long way from where I am right now. There, people would all the time give me a dirty look. It was constant. It was so constant that if it didn't happen, I was shocked. That's how common it was. It happens almost all the time. It virtually never happens here. In fact, right now I'm trying to think of a single case where it happened, and I can't think of one. I can't think of a single time when anyone looked at me askance for dressing like the communist I am. I don't know why that is, whether it's because people here are more tolerant, or whether it's because people here are simply not familiar with communism. I would say that either of those, or perhaps both, might be true. I don't know, but not here, not here. Here, no one seems to give a darn how I dress. Now, do I like that? Yes and no. I mean, it's nice not to have people look at you badly. I mean, who wants to have people look at you badly? Maybe some people, but not me. I would rather have people be kind to me, at least fairly kind to me. That's what I would like. Um, but and when I was living there in Kansas, many people were not that kind to me. I once had somebody spit at me. It was that bad. Here, no, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Literally no reactions at all to how I dress. I can even tell somebody a communist and they will not respond in a bad way. Whether they know what communism is, I don't know, but they don't seem to care. It could be because this is a predominantly Mexican American area, and Mexican Americans here are not as bigoted toward communists as people were in Kansas. Maybe. Again, I don't know. I am simply coming up blank in trying to think of an explanation. I can't think of one. Okay, now, that was actually the introduction to what I wanted to talk about today, which will not be as long, I don't think. Really, what I wanted to talk about today was my term, socialism from below hyphen third worldism. Now, why have I chosen the term socialism from below third worldism? Well, a couple of reasons. One, because in the past, I put socialism from below or communism from below in one category and Maoism third worldism in another. I decided that it made more sense to collapse both of them into a single category. And that's what I did. So the fact that I'm now using the term socialism from below third worldism does not make me any less of a Maoist third worldist than I was before. If you have looked at any of my written materials, you know that. If you haven't, you know it now. I am a heterodox Maoist. Heterodox, which is not the same as unorthodox, comes from the prefix hetero, which means different or other, and the suffix dox or doxy, which means doctrine. So heterodox or heterodoxy means different or other doctrine. Simple, right? Okay. So I am a heterodox Maoist, meaning my views of Maoism are not exactly the same as those of Mao Zedong. I mean, Mao Zedong was a Maoist, I guess, or no, he wasn't a Maoist. He was Mao. He was Mao. He wasn't a Maoist. He was Mao. But his followers were Maoists. So rather than say that, I figured I would collapse those two things, Maoism, third worldism, and socialism from below, into socialism from below, third worldism. But that does not reflect a change in my view. It only reflects a change in my syntax. Isn't that a nice word, syntax? A change in how I describe it. And I think it's clearer now because there certainly is a relationship between socialism from below and third worldism, namely that I believe in socialism from below, that socialism will be initiated or should be initiated by the proletariat and perhaps by the subaltern. Subaltern, a term that was coined in a communist context by Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Marxist and communist. And it is generally used to refer to the marginalized or othered people in society. Now, is that what Gramsci meant? That is an issue which has been debated for decades, and there has still been no resolution. So all I can say is that when I use the term subaltern, regardless of what Gramsci had in mind, I am referring to the marginalized people, the othered people of our planet. And there are plenty of those to go around. There are plenty of those here in my country, the United States, and there are plenty of those in countries around the world. So that's the socialism from below part. So now you got part one. Second part, third worldism. Well, that's Maoism, third worldism. But now I just use the term heterodox Maoism, so I don't see a need to repeat the Maoism part. But I'm using the word third worldism there to reflect my view that communism or revolutionary socialism, pick your term, will start in the third world, not in the first world. Now, does that make the first world really bad and evil? Yes, it does. Well, but that's not the reason why I'm using it. It does make the first world pretty bad and evil. I'm not going to deny that. But the reason why I'm using that term is simply because of accuracy, because that's where I think that socialism or communism will begin. It will begin in the first world. I'm sorry, in the third world, not the first world. Now, will it eventually make its way to the first world? I have no idea. I am a really, really, really bad prophet. A really, really, really bad prognosticator, which means the same thing as prophet, pretty much. If you want to know the weather, don't ask me, because I will give you the wrong forecast. Even if I'm well intentioned, even if I read it, somehow it will get distorted inside my head, and I will give you entirely the wrong information. I have predicted revolution many times in the past. It has never happened. The last time I did it was at the end of Donald Trump's administration. And the reason I predicted it was because Donald Trump himself had talked about starting a war with either mainland China or Iran. So I thought, well, that's a pretty good indicator that Trump may be starting World War III. Well, as it turned out, even though Trump was the commander in chief, which I always thought meant that the people in the Department of Defense or the Pentagon, whatever you want to call it, were supposed to obey him, they did not obey him. They refused. They said, no, Donald, or no, they probably said, no, Mr. President. Maybe they said no, Donald. I have no idea. But they turned him down. They said, no, we are not going to start a war in mainland China or in Iran. And I don't think that Trump knew what to do at that point. So he simply gave up. And that was the end. And there was, I guess, maybe thankfully, depending upon your viewpoint, not a war between the United States and I assume other countries as well, with Iran or with mainland China. That would have been a really, really devastating war. So it is socialism from below, below meaning the proletariat and possibly the subaltern, but it is socialism from below, which I believe will start in the third world, and which may, I don't know. I'm not going to make any predictions. Don't bait me, which may eventually make its way over to the first world, but maybe not. Maybe the first world is finished. Maybe we are all wrapped up. Maybe that will be literally the end of the first world. Finally. I started getting really, really angry in the last series of podcasts. I decided to replace my anger with more humor. I injected humor into my podcast before, but I would say it was more angry than humorous. I was constantly being angry. Why? Because I was angry. It's easy to get angry just reading the news or watching the news or whatever you do to get the news. It's easy to get angry. How could you not get angry? But anger doesn't solve anything. Anger is not a resolution to the problems which plague us right now. Certainly, the kind of partisan politicking that I had gotten involved in was, in my view, harmful. I pledged in my work, including on the main page of the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism, that I would be nonpartisan and apolitical. I violated that. If you want to know another reason why I have hidden the podcasts from the first series, that is honestly another reason. It's not the only reason. Much of it is just to make it easier to navigate. But I really felt bad about the extent to which I had gotten so involved in partisanship that I was condemning political leaders. Even if that was justified, and I'm not going to say whether it was or wasn't, I will leave that for you to decide. That is not the direction I want this podcast to go. I can express exactly what I want without getting totally wrapped up in complete and total anger, which is what I did in the first season of this podcast. So I will make an effort not to do that anymore. Can I make any guarantees? If I make guarantees, I will go back to being a false prophet. So no, I can't make guarantees. But what I can do is to tell you that I now take that promise that I made to avoid partisanship and politics seriously, which I did not do last season. And I regret that. However much I feel that it might have been a good thing to do, or maybe not good, but a justifiable thing to do, given the world situation, it was really a reflection of myself. I was expressing my own anger, and in doing so, I was expressing me. Because I occasionally do feel tremendous anger. I don't like seeing people suffer. And there are a lot of people suffering all over the world. And so it was easy for me to be drawn into politics and partisanship based on my sense of empathy for the people in the world, especially the third world, but also the first world, who are suffering so gravely and who literally appear to have no one to turn to. And so with that in mind, I will make every effort I can to avoid partisan politics in the future, and instead to focus on conveying information and trying to do so when appropriate and when possible with a certain degree of humor. I mean, I did, after all, used to be a stand-up comic, a ventriloquist. Now, whether my sense of humor is that good, I have no idea, but I will try to take a more light-hearted approach to the things I talk about, even though I realize that many of those things are not light-hearted. Of course, I realize that. And I realize that many people are in pain. So, by my lighthearted approach, I am not dismissing the suffering, the struggling that people are going through at all. I recognize what's happening around the world, but I don't think that anger will do anything to solve that problem. It may sometimes be, I guess you could say, cathartic for me, meaning it may relieve my stress. And I am a person, as an autistic, who does experience a considerable amount of stress and who sometimes has difficulty communicating. That's one of the major characteristics of autism. And a difficulty with cognition, another characteristic of autism. But I will do my best to be better and to do better this season than I was in the last. This has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.